One man has the chance to do the impossible. We are the Spy-Fi guys, and this is Mission Impossible. Welcome to the Spy-Fi guys, where we cover spy facts, spy fiction, and everything in between. I'm Christian.
And I'm Zach.
And today we have a guest.
Hello, Spy-Fi guy.
Hey, Jay. So Jay is from Zach's other podcast.
Yes, our much less professional, but equally as fun, Tuesday Night Gaming. You can find it wherever you find podcasts. Anything else you want to plug, Jay?
No, I'm okay with it.
All right, so today we are covering the first Mission Impossible film, which I think I mentioned way back in our introductory episode is like the first spy movie I ever saw. Also the first PG-13 movie I ever saw. I was, I think, 11 at the time, so it definitely affected my life.
So was it Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom was your first PG-13 movie? I think a lot of people's.
That's a good point.
It was the first
at least
one.
The first one in theaters.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
This one's way less traumatic.
Is it
nobody's hearts are getting ripped out of their chests.
I mean,
but the emotional.
Yeah, emotionally, yes, exactly.
Amazing.
Well, before we get into the movie, I just wanted to know if we could talk about everybody's background with Mission Impossible as a franchise.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Okay, so we know my background with that, well, at least the beginning of it, and I've seen every other of the movies in theaters. I think I've seen most of them multiple times in theaters, so I'm a huge fan of the franchise.
What about the TV series? I've
seen, let's see, maybe half of the first season and a few episodes of like the later seasons. But it's one of the things that I want to work through because I know it's good, and I liked what I see. But just there's a lot of it, and there's the original, and then there's also the I think the '80s series, which is all set and filmed in Australia.
Right, that makes. I guess I will go. I'm a little older, so I have been around when the show was still on air at times. So I did grow up watching the show for a while. And I thoroughly enjoyed them. I have watched most of the movies, except for I think the last one in the theater when they've released.
Oh, but you've seen it? Just not
I have not seen the last one yet. For some reason, I just did not get around to it.
Maybe on Prime right now.
I believe it is. So So as soon as I was rewatching this, I was like, oh, one of these days I will get back to it. I was actually thinking of maybe watching it tonight.
We'll
see what happens. But yeah, so that's my background. I grew up with the show, loving. I mean, this is what got me interested in all the Bonds this started off my affinity for spies and spy movies.
All right.
Okay, thanks, Jay. So I was aware of the show and the first three movies. I heard they were not very good. That's just what I heard. That's what I heard. So I had seen bits and pieces of them. I saw the part where Tom Cruise is mountain climbing and then he takes off his sunglasses and throws them and then they blow up. And I also heard that they have masks. So I never really thought much about it until Ghost Protocol came out. And that was really good. And I was really impressed. It didn't make me go back and watch the other three. But I did watch the other two in theaters. Rogue Nation was kind of forgettable, but Fallout was really good. That's my opinion. I don't remember very much about Rogue Nation.
Well, when we get around to it, we'll cover it. But I'm going to say here, there were two movies that came out that year, Spectre and Rogue Nation, and they basically have the same plot, but Rogue Nation did it better. But they also pretty much had the same plot as Captain America: The Winter Soldier.
They were pretty similar. I mean, I think they were done okay, but definitely Spectre was the weaker version.
Oh yeah. And I say that as a huge Bond fan, and I really wanted to like Spectre, but yeah, Rogue Nation did most of the same plot and even some of the same locations better. Anyways, but let's get to the actual movie. So this is the first Mission Impossible movie. Let's just jump in with the synopsis.
An American agent under false suspicion of disloyalty must discover and expose the real spy without the help of his organization.
Actually, that's a pretty succinct, if you have no idea what's going on in this movie, that's actually a pretty good summary of what happens. So we start off in Kiev, And we have, it looks like a hotel room. Jack, who is Emilio Estevez, who I think he was the first person I recognized this movie. I was like, wait, what is Coach Bombay doing here?
Exactly.
Emilio
Exactly. I was caught off guard too. I was like, wait, what? How is he a spy? I mean, it comes into play later on with later cast too. You're like, wait, why is this guy in this spy movie? But then I guess it plays off the fact that you need people of different styles to play in different environments, right? And also different talents. So it totally made sense later on, but at the initial kickoff of it was like, dude, get off.
For the original show, it's very team based. Everyone had a role and every specialty. That's why you have all these different sort of characters. And so we have Jack, who's Emilio Estevez. He's the computer guy. He's watching them on the screen.
I have a question. I was confused because I thought he was watching a movie while he was working on his computer.
No.
Because I was like, hokey dialogue, over the top acting, somebody's dead. This has got to be like, it's in black and white. It's got to be a movie from like the 1940s.
No, he's watching a surveillance screen.
As it turns out. A surveillance screen that apparently can track and move like a Hollywood camera.
Yep. So we've got a guy with a mustache who's interrogating this other sort of heavier set, sweaty guy who's like just in a wife beater. And there's this girl on the bed and there's all this blood around. And so the mustache guy is, trying to get the name of the contact in Minsk. And the sweaty guy is like, I don't even know how I got back here. What happened? We were just drinking, having fun. So I don't know. And so the mustache guy's like, just give me the name. We can help you out.
And then meanwhile, Jack is working on his computer and there's a woman dressed like the St. Pauli girl behind him.
Yep. And so he gives him the name, Dmitry Medvedev. Hannah, who's another member of the team, is, dressed up in, looks like a dirndl or something, like a German dress, basically.
Right.
She's put with an eyedropper, put in some unknown liquid into whatever shots she's bringing out. So the mustache guy and the sweaty guy are drinking, take a shot, but you notice the mustache guy takes it up to his mouth and just tosses it, doesn't actually drink it. And the sweaty guy gets knocked out instantaneously. And this is where I just love this, Once that happened, knock on the wall. The walls come down. It's a sound stage, basically.
Well, they do it in later movies.
Yeah.
I don't want to spoil it, but it does happen. And then the mustache guy pulls his own face off, and it's Tom Cruise, and it's young Tom Cruise.
1996 Tom Cruise.
Mm-hmm. I wasn't looking for his middle tooth in this movie. I should go back and watch it again.
Yeah. So he goes over to Claire, who was the woman who was in the bed with all blood all around her. She's not actually dead. She's just got, fake blood, and she's been under. So he wakes her up, and you're trying to get her up, make sure, because apparently she'd been under too long. So he's trying to wake her up, and then as soon as she wakes up, she says, "Did we get it? We got it." Cue the theme song.
The great theme song. It's never out of place.
No, it's so good. And I love. So this is a thing that they did in the TV show. They have scenes from the upcoming episode, or in this case, movie, spread throughout the theme song with the fuse burning through, and then titles, and then everything blows up, and it's great.
It also reminded me of Battlestar Galactica because they used to do that, and everyone hated it because they were like, "You have our money. We're gonna watch the episode, so why are you spoiling us?"
It's not it's like a trailer for the episode.
Yeah, but for Battlestar, it was worse. Like they kind of would give away things.
Oh,
yeah,
no.
That was the big difference. Battlestar always gave like key shots that you're now anticipating for. So the whole time you're watching, you're looking for these key scenes. Whereas Mission Impossible, they typically just gave random bits and pieces with no, and because they were independent of each other, right? Every movie and every show was relatively independent. So you had no contextual information. So you didn't know when or how this would apply.
Exactly.
Which was the big difference.
Also, I feel like it's very quick cutting. So,
but they didn't keep doing it, right? Like in Ghost Protocol, they don't have.
Oh, they do.
They do? I don't remember that.
Actually, Ghost Protocol, and we'll get to it later, and I will go way in depth with it. But it's not even clips. They actually have the fuse going around actual scenes that they reshot just for the title sequence. So they have different angles and everything else. So I really like of the 6 title sequences, I think, this one and Ghost Protocol are some of the best. 2 and 3 are the only ones that don't actually use scene.
Yeah, I think it was a good evolution in their style and their cinematography of it all. Each movie builds upon different concepts, which is really nice to see the progression. So if you do start watching them through, you can see how they play with lighting, how they play with the scene and the camera positioning, and disguising like the mask ripoffs, and like how they completely slowly adjust where they're showing it, so it comes off as a little more of a gotcha moment at times.
Yeah.
So this great sequence ends with a very, I feel, corny title where it says mission, and there's like a stamp that comes in and says impossible.
I loved it.
I mean, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's corny.
All right. So after the credits, we go to Jim Phelps on a plane. Now, Jim Phelps was the second leader of the IMF in the TV show. He was the main character, pretty much.
Did they have any of the actors from the old TV show cameo in the movie? They
all declined.
Really?
And and when we get to it, you'll see why.
Okay. Well, because that's very popular now, is remaking movies and then having the old actors be in it. So like the A-Team is an example. Yeah. There are probably others. Anyway.
Yeah. Stewardess is coming by asking if would you like to watch a movie? This is the days of tapes where they'd actually hand out tapes to like business class and first class. I've never been on a plane that actually did it, but I think I took business class once, and they had a screen that folded up like that, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. Just because in my mind, that's what I thought of when they had the screen that folds up from below.
So do they exist in 1996, the screens that fold up just in business class?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I like the back and forth. Would you like to watch a movie? I prefer the theater. Perhaps you'll choose one for me. And it's spy talk.
And so with that part, do you think, though, so I couldn't ever figure out when I watched it as way back when, was that meant to be the call signals? Like, was that supposed to be that, or is that just them being cheesy? Like, we are spies, ha 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 ha. Or was that an actual given call?
I think that's a given call, usually. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. So he gets his mission on the tape, and again, just like in the show, it'd usually be either cassette or a record, and it would come with photos. So it'd be like the man you're looking at is whoever. So they do that pretty much word for word in this. And the man you're looking at is Alexander Golitsyn, who's an attaché at their embassy in Prague, and he's stolen the knock list, which is the list of all of their agents, basically, and their code names, which seems like a bad thing to store.
Many movies,
but this is the first.
You're sure it's the first? There are a lot of movies.
I've looked for like a list of code names, especially computerized in that form. Like that, I feel like this is the first. I found a list of other films and TV shows that use it. Obviously, Mission Impossible, Skyfall uses it. Atomic Blonde uses it. Even Spies in Disguise use it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't recall.
Burn Notice and Hawaii 5-0 / Magnum PI had their crossover. Those two, not Burn Notice as well, but Burn Notice used it, and then Hawaii 5-0 and Magnum PI had a crossover episode where it was they explicitly called it the knock list. I'm like, wow, okay, guys.
What does knock stand for?
Non-official cover. So this is a real thing. I'll get into it in our Spy Fact versus Spy Fiction.
Okay.
But yeah, so their plan is they're going to follow Golitsyn, find his buyer, apprehend both of them. And so the IMF has chosen a team for Jim. Usually he gets to choose, who is his team, but this time they've chosen it for him. Jack, who covers surveillance. Hannah.
I can't believe you wrote down what they all did. I was
this is in my head.
Team. Okay.
Let's see. Sarah is undercover at the embassy. His wife Claire handles transportation, and Ethan Hunt's the point man.
So already I'm like, okay, wait a second. None of these people are in the later movies.
Yeah, but the team usually the team changes a lot. Usually.
Yeah, they're not usually set cells, right? They're usually ad hoc for whatever skill set is required at that time for that particular mission. They're all independent contractors, basically.
Is that in the series?
Yeah, in the series. And also, both in the show and in the movies, too. Yeah.
But in Ghost Protocol and moving forward, there was always Simon Pegg, there was always Ving Rhames, there was always
they're
Michelle
popular
Monaghan.
Characters.
They're popular characters, and because of events that slowly happen throughout the movies, there's certain change. You can see that the way they're operating slowly changes and shifts, where you only go with trusted people. Whereas
That's true. Yeah.
in the initial movies, you had no idea who you were going to work with. You just had to assume that they were okay and you were going to trust them, right?
Except for Luther.
You didn't have a particular bond with any of the other agents.
Except Luther.
Think of it like the Bourne Identity, where every agent is just sitting there waiting to be called. They don't necessarily know. They know of each other, but they don't know each other.
Okay. Well, I thought they would just be forgotten in the next movie, like this week's Bond girl.
So we get to Prague, and then we go to their safe house. And
yes, wait, I wanted to say something about Prague.
Oh, I also have.
I've been to Prague.
Me too.
Have you been to the Prague Castle and on that bridge?
Yes. Oh no. So on our honeymoon, me and my wife, we went to a few different places. Coincidentally, all of which have had Mission Impossible films filmed in them.
You didn't really plan your honeymoon around Mission Impossible, did you?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Okay. Well, it seemed to have worked out.
But I did visit pretty much every location they filmed it. Every major location they did filmed in Prague. And
so
when
you got to get to Dubai next.
Yeah. So when this goes up, I will post on our social media the photos that I took of those locations as they exist now. Many of them still exist. I may have even filmed some stuff.
Nice.
Oh, I think I recall you mentioning that before.
So we get to the safe house, and Jim is telling them the plan. Ethan's going in undercover. Sarah's already there undercover. Jack is going into the elevator shafts covering surveillance. Hannah is going to be eye in the sky. She's in person. She's tracking someone through there. Claire's handling transport. As they're talking, they reveal that Jim wasn't in the last mission with them because he was off on a cushy recruiting assignment. He was staying at the Drake Hotel in Chicago.
And Ethan has like this attitude in this whole scene.
He's very
it's like Maverick.
Yeah, exactly. He's very Top Gun. He's very Maverick in this scene.
Well, it's just interesting to see that because in all the movies I'm familiar with this character, he's like the straight-laced, button-up, no-nonsense guy.
And it's an evolution of his character, really. Because this is when he's very young, and he's evolved into becoming the team leader.
Yeah, this is when he's the hot shot who gets called in, and he just does his thing, and then he's done. But like he's the go-to. He is invincible, and nothing can ever touch him at this point. Still.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so Jim details a plan for them, and the big thing is that basically, if these names get out in the open and exposed and sold to, third world terrorists, arms dealers, drug lords, any and everyone who would like to get, rid of the IMF, they'll all be executed. And so they really need to make sure they get this thing right.
Yep. So they get their gadgets, they get spy glasses, which have cameras, and they remind me of every spy gadget you get at a toy store.
Spy Museum may or may not sell camera glasses, and I've been very tempted by them.
It's funny rewatching it and then seeing Emilio with the glasses and the lights. They immediately made me think of the Snapchat glasses. They look exactly the same as the Snapchat glasses, except for they're black instead of yellow.
Mm-hmm, yeah. And also they have fancy watches which have monitors built into them.
Yeah, it's like from Dick Tracy.
Or may not have made toys out of them.
What does that do?
Well, this is a toy from 1996 that I do own, and this one just has a recording, like a voice recorder.
I'll try to remember to post a picture of that too.
I will. I have photos of all these things that I can post.
And then their other spy gadget is exploding gum. Mm-hmm. Don't eat it. And this reminded me of Spy Kids, where they have trick gum in that.
And that what Spy Kids was inspired by for this. Because this was a big thing. That was the gadget of the movie. More so than anything else was the exploding gum.
So also during this, we get a thing about Senator Waltzer.
Yes. So this is who Tom Cruise or Ethan Hunt is going undercover into the embassy as, and he's a senator. I don't remember if they mentioned which state he's from. It might be Wisconsin, I feel like.
Do they ever mention what state these senators are from in movies?
Mm-hmm.
Rarely, but
once in a while they will, but I don't recall them mentioning it specifically. I think it was just senator this, diplomat this.
Mm-hmm. There's also a brief scene of Waltzer talking about how he wants more transparency with the intelligence community.
Yes, and we will talk about something they mention in that scene in our Spy Fact versus Spy Fiction.
Okay.
Ooh.
So they go in. Ethan is posing as the senator, and I guess he's like doing a voice. He doesn't have a voice changer like in the later movies.
No, those are not introduced until later films. So he is doing that voice. It's a very Foghorn Leghorn voice, very over-exaggerated Southern accent.
Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, Jack is dodging elevators to get into position.
So this whole scene was filmed in not actually the embassy, but in the Prague National Museum, which I visited.
It was closed when I got there.
Yeah, well,
we got there too late in the day.
But it looks exactly the same, and it was surreal for me just because this movie I'd seen hundreds of times probably, so it exists in my mind, but actually walking around that physical environment was crazy. But yeah, so we have Ethan, undercover. He's going in, and he meets up with Sarah, who's undercover there, and they're working together. We see that Golitsyn is in the embassy as well, as he is right behind Sarah. We have Hannah, who's up on the stairwell, watching everything. And Sarah marks the package with a spray, and then Hannah takes her glasses, pulls the shade, is what she says, and basically transitions the lens. So now it's a darker tinge, and she can see, the specific color that is sprayed on Golitsyn by Sarah.
Yeah, it's hard to miss if you're watching under the right circumstances.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. When I first saw it, I was like, oh, that's brilliant. A little spray with a little dye or coloring of some sort, infrared. Who knows what type it is? I don't think they actually explained that. But then I thought, I remember as a kid going, who the hell wears sunglasses inside? Wouldn't that be a giveaway? But then I was like, well, I guess they're not that badly tinted. And now looking at it, I'm like, those glasses would fit in perfectly in today's world with butter glasses and that specific design of the big old glasses. I was like, oh, those would totally work right now.
And they're I've posted this, anytime because I wear glasses sometimes and I have transition lenses. So anytime I go out in the sun and they start to transition, I just think of this.
Do the transition lenses actually work?
Oh yeah.
Because I remember when I was in middle school, people would get them and then they would just get stuck midway between sunglasses and not sunglasses.
No, mines will get pretty dark pretty quickly, actually, about a few minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, it was transitioning back to the indoors, but it also depended on the lighting, the types of lights that were usually in schools. A lot of times my friends had the exact same issue where it wouldn't recognize the fact that you're inside anymore. So then they would just be slightly dark and everyone eventually would just get rid of them real quick.
Yeah, so Ethan and Sarah are going over to the denied access area. Sarah, touches the elevator button, which has a fingerprint scanner inside of it. And as they're doing that, the people in the security booth are start to get active. They notice that her fingerprint's not in the system, which Jack is supposed to be handling, but he's still working on it. And so there's a great line here where they have to tell Jack hurry up, but they have to do it in code. So Sarah asks, is there someone on your staff named Jack? Ethan's like, yes, we did have a Jack, an unreliable fellow, as I recall, constantly late and behind in his work.
So I don't feel like they needed to tell him to hurry up. I think this was just Ethan having fun and being his Maverick type self.
And I
think Jack knows the stakes.
Yeah.
Okay, so he gets them in.
Mm-hmm.
They get into this bunker, and they plant these spy glasses and try to get out.
Yeah. So the glasses are there so that they can see. They spend some time adjusting it to make sure that they can see in those glasses and on the monitors that Golitsyn is stealing the knock list.
Yep. But then Golitsyn shows up. Jon Voight has a line that I liked that says he's in the box, which means he's in the elevator. So I really like that. And our heroes escape by hiding under the elevator.
Mm-hmm. As they're underneath the elevator, they're waiting for Golitsyn to steal it. And they see it on their watches. He steals it. They go out. And Tom Cruise removes his mask, which is if you notice, is the only one where it doesn't cleanly pull off. It kind of peels. It's because it's the only time that's actually a practical mask, not
digital. Just another actor. Yeah.
And then he also, I like this. He turns his white tuxedo jacket inside out, so it's a black tuxedo now, and so it looks completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so they go outside. Him and Sarah are fake making out to look like they're just blending in.
I have a question about the tuxedo really quick.
Yes.
Do you ever get annoyed that some of these spy movies should find something else for them to wear besides tuxedos because that's the James Bond thing?
No, because they're at an embassy party. That makes complete sense. In this case, in later films, he doesn't wear tuxedos that often. It's usually just when it's appropriate, like whether he's in a fancy party or an embassy or whatnot.
I wonder if the James Bond people tried to trademark a spy wearing a tuxedo as like a thing.
They have not, but Bond actors are not allowed to wear tuxedos in other films while they're in the role.
It's like part of their contract.
Yep.
Yeah,
which
just
is
like
why
Pierce Brosnan, right?
Yes,
You were going with the
exactly.
Pierce Brosnan. He's not allowed to have a bow tie in his movies as he's wearing a formal wear because that is a tuxedo that completes the tuxedo look, which is interesting.
In the what was that? What's that movie?
The one with Jennifer
The
Lopez.
Thomas Crown Affair.
Yeah,
he has to have it untied.
But now that he's no longer James Bond, he can wear it.
Now he can do it,
right?
but that was while he was still in the role. So yes, so the answer to that question. But moving on, so Golitsyn has the disc. He goes out his exit, and as he's exiting, Jack's still on top of the elevator, and for some reason the elevator stops to go up. No one had done this. He's not sure what's going on, and it's going up real fast. And so everyone's saying, "Get out of there, Jack! Cut the power. You need to get out." He doesn't have enough time, and these pincer things on the top of the elevator crush his
stab
head,
him through the eye.
Yeah.
No, they don't crush his head. They stab him through the eye.
That's right. Yeah.
So I guess that's like the heart being ripped out moment for this movie.
Yeah, Coach Bombay.
But at least it's very brief.
Mm-hmm.
So Jack dies. The target is on the escape. Jon Voight is like, we got to get out of here. It's a trap.
Jim is leaving the safe house and going to Ethan and Sarah to come get them and help them. And he's going off. He goes out onto the Charles Bridge. As he's out there, he says, I have a shadow, and we need to abort. And Ethan's arguing with him, saying, no, we got to get this list. That's an order, abort.
Right. But then Maverick goes rogue, like he always does.
So he tells Sarah, you keep your eyes on the package. I'm going to go get Jim. Runs over the bridge. Actually, no, he walks over the bridge. And as he's going there, Jim tells everyone, like, they're covering this frequency, cut all radio communication. He passes by Claire, who's in the car. And as he's going up the stairs to the bridge, over the radio, he hears a shot.
He doesn't hear. He gets visual.
Well, he hears a shot, and then he looks at the video. Yeah.
Right. And then it's...
Yeah.
It looks like Jon Voight dies.
Yeah, so Jon Voight gets shot. He looks up at a statue of an angel, and then he looks down, and there's bloody hands. This may be the scene that I recreated.
I see. So then also somewhere in here, I have this down where Ethan grabs Sarah by the shoulders, and he says, we are going to recover that disc.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Which is, it's like something out of a video game where they constantly need to be reminding the audience what's going on.
To be fair, this is a fairly complicated plot, and it's only the first, 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah, this is 22 minutes into the film. I'm actually running it in the background to make sure that I keep my notes in line. But it's not just a video game plot, right? It's because they are spies. They had already said to abort the mission, that everyone needed to go underground, that it was being scrubbed. But like you said, Ethan is a maverick, right? So he's invulnerable. He has never failed a mission. And so, I mean, it goes back to that whole idea of the mission comes first, right? Our lives are expendable because we are spies. We are disavowed. This is how it has to happen.
Okay, that's fine. Maybe it's just because the movie's older, but I feel like they could have had the dialogue be a little cleaner. Like he could be like, forget it, I'm going after him. Or I'm getting the disc. Even just as simple as I'm getting the disc.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Okay. So then it looks like Jon Voight dies. And then I was like, is Sarah a traitor too? Or is Sarah just a traitor? Because there's like a part where she's like kind of staring at the camera and you don't know what's going on.
So that's when she's watching Golitsyn. She's watching him, trying to not keep, too close, but far enough that she doesn't look suspicious. Well, she does, but far enough away that, she's inconspicuous, but close enough that you can actually see what's going on. Ethan runs onto the bridge, trying to find Jim, doesn't see him, heard the shot and has seen everything. He tries to get on radio with Sarah, but Sarah, being a good agent, actually cut her communications. And so he can't get in touch with her. So he runs to where she is. He sees her basically leaning against the bridge, or not bridge, against the gate. Golitsyn is there too. They're both, she's not dead yet. Oh. She's just barely not dead. Because he says his name, Ethan, and he finds a knife inside her, which is a very distinctive looking knife.
And then meanwhile, somewhere along the line, Claire gets blown up in her car.
Oh, yeah.
So basically everybody's dead.
So as Hannah, as outside the car, goes inside, and it explodes. So everyone's dead. Ethan, as he's escaping from the police, does this really cool move over the fence that I always like. How did he do that?
I won't lie, I've attempted that move once or twice, and I have back issues for some odd reason.
I found the fence in Prague.
Cool.
And I was
you
so
really did a lot of
tempted.
effort.
I was very tempted to just climb up it and try to jump over that, but no, I did not. Also, more importantly, the disc is not there.
Right.
So the disc is gone.
So he runs to a payphone and he calls headquarters with some code phrases. He says, "They knew we were coming, man. Game over, man. Game over, man."
Yeah. So, and he gets on the line to Kittredge, who is apparently he was the voice on the recording that Jim saw. He's also part of the CIA, as we later find out. But he's basically in charge of IMF operations.
Okay, so they are going to meet at the Aquarium
restaurant in Old Town Prague. Does not exist.
Yeah, I didn't think so, but I have been there, and I'm sure so have you, Christian, because it's the spot to go for tourists.
Yeah. Kittredge says, I'll meet you there in 1 hour. And he's confused. He's like, you're in Prague? You're the head of operations. Why are you here?
Mm-hmm.
So they meet. Kittredge is in the front, gives them this spiel about, here's your passport visa. We'll run the exfiltration through Canada. And Ethan is blaming himself for everyone being dead.
Yep.
And Kittredge reveals...
Well, we learned some things. We learned there's another team there.
Yes, and actually, if you watch it very closely, you can see them. So the two drunk Russians are the most prominent ones. Mm-hmm. They were around Sarah. They're one of them almost falls into the river, and they do a lot of close-ups on them when Sarah's watching Golitsyn. You see them watching Sarah, and so they're in the restaurant, and the guy with the bow tie, who's right behind Kittredge. Yeah, Krieger's later. Kittredge is behind Hannah, as she's pulling the shade. And so it's if you just watch for them, and they actually pop up. This same team is the same team that pops up later on throughout the film, too, working with Kittredge.
So I like this because it's like Sherlock Holmes, where you have a chance of spotting it if you're a good enough secret agent, which I am not. Okay, so then it's revealed that the whole thing was just a sting operation to find a mole within the IMF. And since Ethan survives, they all assume, kind of ridiculously, that he must therefore be the mole.
I mean, he survived. He's the only one left.
But what kind of evidence is that? And also, I have a question.
Yes.
If the IMF set this up to catch a mole, who was killing all those people? Who's killing all the agents?
It's a great question, and we will discuss it. So, one of the things that Kittredge reveals is that there's a Czech arms dealer known as Max, who apparently has been buying secrets from this unknown person who is the mole. He thought that Golitsyn was doing the job for them that night, referred to as Job 314. But the list that Golitsyn stole was a decoy, and Golitsyn was actually in on it and knew what was going on.
Well, I would hope so, since the whole thing was fake.
Yeah, but we find out apparently the real knock list is in Langley.
Which is, of course, exactly where it should be.
Yeah, why would it be in a random embassy in Prague? The other reason that they think that Ethan is the mole, we find out he's from Wisconsin. His dad's dead. There was a bank account that belonged to the farm he's from, and it was supposed to be wiped out because his dad died. It was a slow illness, but now it's 120 grand flush. So there's all this money that they don't know where it came from. Ethan apparently doesn't know, but it's all set up to make it seem like he's the mole. Yeah, it's a frame.
Yes. So he has to escape, so he uses the gum on the fish tank behind him, which gives off a tidal wave of water, way more than what would actually be in the fish tank, I'm fairly sure.
Well, if you look at the fish tank, it's above them, it's behind them, it's all around. It's a lot of water.
Yeah, and if you see the fish inside, I mean, it obviously goes up. It needs to... There's a lot more to it than just what I was discreetly shown in that point.
I mean, the restaurant is called Aquarium, which is aquarium.
Right.
Yeah, and it's right on the waterfront and all that stuff. So quick, before we go on, as Kittredge is explaining how your counts are flush and everything, Ethan is in there and he slowly starts moving his hands up his pants and everything. When I first saw that, I was like, oh, he is a mole. He's going for his gun.
Ooh.
And I was really confused at first.
Hmm.
I thought it was a double on me as a kid. And I was like, well, not as a kid, but I mean, I was like, oh crap.
Tom Cruise
What
the bad
this,
guy?
Even if he was going for his gun, that doesn't necessarily mean he's the mole. I mean, he blows up the restaurant to escape,
right,
which is
but
something a mole would do as well.
right, but that part when he pulls out the gun, I'm like, okay, and he's trying to get away. If he was probably guilty, he probably would have just shot Kittredge and shot his way out of there. That's the way it worked through my head. But I was like, as he was moving his hands up his leg, I was like, oh, wait, this movie got me again. The movie got me. It got me.
Well, yeah. So, and then this is where we get our first big instance of Tom Cruise running.
Oh yeah, well, it's
And
a
also one
slow
of
mo
his-
explosion too,
Yeah,
and then he
that
runs.
great stunt that he did himself. Like I always describe him as when his running is like karate chopping the air, because it's always very straight hands, not like in a fist or even like loose. It's just straight hands up and down.
That's like the T-1000.
If this movie came out later, or I would have pictured him doing the Naruto run.
Oh, that would be
Nice.
hilarious. All right, so Ethan makes it back to the safe house. He does it. As he's going up, he grabs one of the light bulbs out in the hallway, crushes it up, and spreads it over the path to the door so that he hears if someone's coming for him.
Right.
Inside the safe house, he grabs a gun from a flower pot, and he finds a bunch of passports he can use to get out of there, but there's no money.
So he just stays in the safe house?
Presumably, so here's the thing about the IMF that's unclear. So in the original show, it was its own independent thing. And if you read there was a novelization for this book, which is kind of hilariously terrible. I've read it a few times.
Okay.
But it explains that in between the show and the movie, IMF got folded into CIA operations.
Oh, that's good to
But
know.
they're still pretty independent. So CIA wouldn't know where their safe house is. They set it up on their own.
Okay, so if they're independent, why doesn't he have higher ups to the IMF that he can call to help him out?
So they're their own section, but the person they report to is Kittredge.
Yeah, they have handlers, right?
Yeah.
So that's their only go-to, because again, they're independent and contractors basically.
Yeah.
So they aren't supposed to. They're supposed to be disavowed. So they're not supposed
they-
to. If they're
yeah.
caught, they have no way to then give up any additional information, such as a knock list.
I know. I was just a little surprised that the CIA wouldn't have an easy way to trace him back to where he was staying.
Well,
Like, you think someone
plausible
would know about
deniability.
it?
Plausible deniability. If they
Okay,
don't
fine.
know about it, they can't be blamed for it.
You have to access the internet with your password in order for you to connect online, and then you have to go to the Usenet group, just like my freaking childhood.
Oh yeah.
Peter, yeah, was there modem sound? I can't remember. if
There was no modem
Not
sound,
in the movie. I
unfortunately.
was waiting
Yeah.
for it. Yeah.
That would just made the cherry on top. But so so the only information he has is Max and Job or Job 314. So he's looking at all the Usenet groups and looking for, anything max.com, which apparently didn't exist.
Yeah,
I should have looked it up before this to see what is at max.com right now.
Let's
Careful
find
what
out.
you look for.
Yeah, there's a but as he's searching all these sorts of things, Job 314, right behind the computer, he spots the Holy Bible and thinks about it. Job 314, Job 314. So he thinks, could it be related? Like, this is a massive leap.
This is ridiculous. This is the most ridiculous part of the movie by far. It also made me think of John 3:16. From football. So he sends emails to random addresses. Well, not random addresses,
No.
but cobbled together email addresses that involve Max and Job.
So what he does is he sends it basically. So he finds a Usenet discussion group about the Book of Job, which is a book in the Bible. These email addresses. These email addresses with spaces and colons.
Yeah, you can tell it's early internet big time.
But yes, so he sends a bunch of emails, yeah.
So looking back at it, I was wondering, I couldn't tell if it were actual emails or if they were members of the Usenet groups that he was direct messaging.
That would make sense, but it's like Max at Job 3:14.
Right. So it'd be user
Right.
Max at the Usenet group, right? I think that's the way
I forget how
supposed to
Usenet
look at.
groups used to work. I don't remember. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's been a while.
But yeah, so he sends messages, a lot of emails in multiple languages, basically, and always quoting the same Bible verse, Job 3:14.
It's like a code phrase. I mean, that part kind of works.
Oh yeah, with kings and rulers of the earth who built themselves palaces now lying in ruins, is one of the translations.
Yeah.
Of course, being the Bible, there are many different versions of translation. So but they're all usually about that sort of phrasing. So as he's sending them off, and it's starting to get earlier in the morning, you see the light. He hears a light bulb crunch, and in his very tired, he basically hallucinates Jim with bloody hands coming towards him, saying, "Why weren't you there? Why aren't you on the bridge?" And it turns out there is someone there, but it's not Jim. It's Claire.
Yes. And we get a totally over the top Tom Cruise here. He's like yelling at her and then aggressively interrogates her.
They're dead. They're all dead.
Ah.
Yeah.
He like kind of manhandles her in a very uncomfortable way, but I guess she passes inspection.
He's also searching her. But yes, it was very aggressive. I'll agree with you on that. He's also asking her, who sent you and why are you here? And also, how come you're not dead? You were in the car. But apparently she wasn't in the car.
Right.
Right. And she's apparently doesn't know that Jim is dead. She has no idea what's going on and all of that.
She finds out very, very abruptly that Jim's dead and reminds Ethan that if they aborted, they were supposed to be back at the safe house at 4 a.m., 0400. And of course,
so in other words, her story lines up.
Yeah. And at that moment, you hear four rings of the bell.
Okay. So then the email works. He hears from Max and goes to meet him.
But also, we find out that Ethan has been disavowed.
Oh, yeah. I sort of assumed that, but we know that for sure.
Yeah, it's a big deal that he was, because I think only once in the actual series did you see someone get disavowed.
I thought he goes rogue every movie.
Actually, not everyone.
But most of them.
A lot of them, but yeah. Anyways, so he gets an email, you're right, and then he goes to meet Max. Because Max has anonymity, he has to wear this like ski mask that's been sewed up.
Mm-hmm. And so then when he gets there, basically he's like, I'm a rogue agent. I have the list. I'll give it to you if you pay me. And he proves this is authentic by showing them that the decoy list has a tracker on it that calls the IMF/CIA pretty much immediately.
About 5 minutes. Yeah.
Right.
As they were waiting for this message, I mean, Claire is like, I can always go ahead and, tell him that, no, you're totally fine. You weren't in on it. And he's like, if you're still alive, they assume you're dead. So obviously they're going to think you're with me. And it's like, how did you not think of that, Claire? What's wrong with you?
Claire doesn't seem too smart for a secret agent. Sorry.
Everyone had their own skills.
And hers was driving, apparently.
Okay, so the old IMF... I say old because a lot of them are old. And they dress like old school spies. And we meet Barnes. We meet Barnes.
Barnes, yes.
Who is played by Dale Dye.
Mm-hmm.
Dale Dye is Colonel Sink from Band of Brothers.
And he was in what is the other movie? Well, he's been in a lot of stuff. Usually has a mustache, actually. So he's a lot of people who know him don't recognize him in this movie because he shaved off his mustache.
Mm-hmm. And he kind of gives off Leslie Nielsen vibes.
He was in The Nice Tale, and that's the only movie I really recognize him from.
Really?
Probably a lot of war movies, I think.
Because he is a former soldier, like I think special ops guy, and usually what he does, his specialty is he does like military boot camps for actors.
Right.
But yeah, so Max, who also we just sort of skipped over the fact that surprise, Max is a woman.
Yes. And is some kind of like arch criminal because she has people who work for her and all that.
Well, she's an arms dealer, is what she is.
Okay.
Can we talk about how awesome the mask they put him in is?
I have been tempted to make it. Because that's about the level of my rudimentary sewing skills, because it's a ski mask and they have like bits of cloth and then the mouth is completely sealed shut with like red and yellow different types of threads.
Yeah, it's so good. It's like they cut up a t-shirt and just jammed it in the eye holes, and then like took thread and was like, sure, and they just like covered the whole crap out of it. It was hilarious.
Because it's like, on the one hand, they went the extra mile and didn't just use like a pillowcase or something, but then when they went the extra mile, they kind of gave up halfway through.
Right. Yeah. And meanwhile, they're in like all this lap of luxury. They have all this stuff, and you're like, you couldn't just get a burlap bag at least? Something?
Yeah.
And it's a ski mask, right? So if it's
it's
you could kind of sort of see through it at times. So it's like,
So the CIA comes in and they're searching the place, and Max and Ethan are gone by the time they get there. And Barnes wants to like basically put a guy at the airport, just flush, search every for him. And Kittredge has a better idea. Instead of chasing after him, make him come to us. He has this great line. Everybody has pressure points. You find something that's valuable for them, and you squeeze.
Gee, that sounds like something a bad guy might say.
You would think so. So, in the car that they've escaped in, we have Max and Ethan, and then apparently the deal with Job was that she would give him Job $6 million for the knock list. She's going to give Ethan the same deal, but she wants the entire list, not just Eastern Europe. Ethan says, "No, I want $10 million, and I want Job at the exchange."
Because he's going to expose Job as the real traitor.
Yeah, and find out who Job is. Yeah,
that too.
And we get the nice line of, is it Max or Maxine? And then she talks about anonymity is a great blanket.
Yeah. So back at the safe house, Claire is there, and you said to yourself, if I'm not dead, I'm with you. Runs through all the different stuff they have. They have rounds for the Beretti and the Sig Sauer. They have visco glasses and a monitor. But they're going to need some help. They can't do this job alone. So they go to the disavowed list, which makes me wonder, how does Ethan still have access to the disavowed list?
I mean, he just got disavowed. I'm sure it takes time for those ancient computers to communicate with each other. Plus all the paperwork. They probably just submitted the paperwork and it was a weekend, so no one was there to actually process the paperwork.
That's fair.
Although it was already appearing in all their systems, but I mean,
also very realistic.
I'm sure they just didn't get around to rescinding his credentials. It's fine.
So we get on a train in London.
Oh,
actually, we don't know. I assume this was the London train, but I actually don't know where this train is. It's a train.
I think they go to London later.
Yeah, they do, but I assume this was a train in London, but I actually have no idea. We don't know where this train is, but they're meeting on a train. We meet our two disavowed agents, Luther Stickle and Krieger, who I don't know if Krieger has if that's his first name or his last name.
It's his last name. His first name is Franz.
Oh, that's right, Franz Krieger. You're right. They run down the plan, and I like this code phrase they use at first when they're just talking about what simple plan.
So I have a question, which is why is Ving and Krieger helping him infiltrate the CIA?
Because he's going to pay them. Yeah, they're disavowed agents.
But like they could potentially have life in prison if they get caught.
Yeah,
but he's going to pay them very well.
And I mean, what other skill? I mean, they're not going to work at Mickey D's or they're not going to get a job at a bank. I mean,
they're mercenaries.
Yeah. Okay, I would have liked to have something to be like, this is no pun intended, an impossible mission. Very, very difficult. I'd like to see more motivation than just money. Like, for example, these guys disavowed me and I want revenge.
Well, Luther gets his motivation. We find out what Luther's motivation is. In code phrase, he says, Exfil opens a pocket, Cyberop slips a wallet. Which means Exfil, who is exfiltration, that's Krieger, and basically his thing is he can fly a helicopter and he can also just get them anything they need, whatever they need. And then Luther is a master hacker, and basically for them this is about he can hack anything and everything, but this is the impossible hack, so that's his motivation for it. Ethan is goading him, saying this is the Mount Everest of hacks.
So he's like a thrill seeker as well.
Every other hacker movie in the world, you put a challenge in front of them, they got to prove themselves the best of the best, right? Nothing is impenetrable. Everything has its weakness. It's typically hackers will think of it as a game. They're just trying to figure out if you're told you will never be able to do it, It's like, okay, especially when he gives a name of the person who has, I can't remember if he developed the system or Phineas.
Phineas Freak, yeah.
Yeah.
What? I'm trying to remember what the references for that.
There were really hackers called phone freaks, spelled Phreaks.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Phineas Gage, is that? Let's see.
No, Phineas Gage is the guy who got the.
No, that's the guy, yeah.
I think it's just a pun on the word freak.
Yeah. Like, okay, so I'm going through and I'm finding it in the actual movie. Ethan goads him, and he's like, "Well, this doesn't sound like the Luther Strickle I heard of."
I know. Yes.
What did they call you? The Net Ranger?
Net Ranger.
Phineas Freak. So he was Phineas Freak.
Yeah.
And the only man who could actually hack the NATO system.
NATO Ghostcom.
And he's like, I never had anything to do with that. But it was
that exceptional piece of work.
Yeah, that was really good.
So that's what it was. So I flipped it in my head. All right. But yeah. And then he goes, it's the Mount Everest, and he's still like, you're kidding yourself. Even I couldn't do it probably. And then they go, well, Krieger. He's like,
going to do it.
Yeah.
So the setup is pretty ridiculous. So they have to get in. First of all, they have to get into the CIA, and they have to get into the special room in the CIA, which you have to have first a retinal scan and a voice ID. That gets you into the outer room. To get into the inner room, you need a electronic key card. And then once you get into the room, there are 3 systems. There's temperature, there's pressure sensitive, and then there's sound.
Right.
And they say that all systems are state of the art. Anything like, for sound, anything above a whisper. For the temperature, anything about, a single degree in rise in temperature. All of that will set off basically a complete lockdown.
So I thought once they were in the room, they had to use the disk on the computer in order to use it.
No.
Is that not the case?
No, that's where Luther was supposed to come in. He was supposed to be able to hack from that console. And they were like, that's not going to happen, bud.
Okay, so they explain the plan, and then they just go and do it. Well, yeah. They explain the obstacles, and then we learn what the plan is as they do it. Unlike all the Ocean's movies where they talk about it and then they do it.
How they're going to do it, yeah. So they come in a fire truck. Luther's there hacking their system, setting off fire alarms. And so they find out which section controls the air conditioning, which is how they're going to get into it. So they're going to crawl through vents.
This was before it was cliche, I guess.
I feel like it was already cliche at this point.
I mean, this was prior to the woman who died in the vent. So, I mean, it was still a thing. People could always break in through vents. So
also, we get a nice shot of the CIA seal, which, again, is in the wrong place.
It's in the wrong place, but at least they got the colors right.
Not like our movie last week, where it was bright blue. But yeah, this obviously was not filmed inside CIA. But...
So our heroes pose as firefighters. So I'm like, wait a second. So they just call the local fire department when there's a fire at CIA?
Seemingly.
So yeah, so I got confused with that too, because I was like, they would probably call and verify. Or because by that time Luther is already behind the computers and all. So and it seems like in those typically in the, I mean, you can see the computer display showing that the fire alarms are actually going off in the CIA. So it meant that they had to have hacked those systems, right?
Yeah,
they couldn't just call that in. So if they could already hack the system, why do they have to hack the system? But then I realized no, that it was a completely subsystem that they were hacking.
Yeah, that system, where the knock list is stored. There's no modem access in there. Luther calls it out earlier.
Right.
Yeah. Where did they get a fire truck?
Well, that's what Krieger's for. He can get everything. I mean,
that's right. Exactly. Yeah.
Because prior to the mission, while they're on the train, Luther says that I can't plan this. I can't do this. I'm going without a lot of materials. And they look at Krieger and go, Krieger, and he's like, what do you need? And he's like, I need 24 hours. But what do you need? And he's like, I need AI chip, specialized AI chip. I need 686 computer. Like, it's like a ridiculous amount of stuff before they go in and basically to prototype their whole entire system. So it's, I was like, holy shit, 24 hours? Wow. For all of that.
Krieger's good at what he does.
Yeah. And it's a movie. Okay, so our heroes are posing as the firefighters. They go in. and then one of them like breaks off from the pack and steps out.
Steps into the ladies' room.
Yes.
And then we meet our hapless technician, William Donlow, who is the guy who actually works on the systems. So he goes into the room. And then we have Ethan and Krieger are the other two firefighters. So they go into section 21 where the air conditioning is set up. The guard is showing him where it is. They knock him out. Krieger is about to kill him with a knife, a very distinctive looking knife. We'll come back to it later.
Right.
And Ethan's like, 0 body count. We're not killing anyone, which is, I think, the first time we get that sense that, Ethan doesn't like killing people, really, if it can be avoided.
Especially innocent people. That seems to be more of the problem. But the fact that they knock somebody out at all, you think would have more ramifications later. But I also liked when Ethan does a karate kick, he does was really loud, like "Hi-ya!" And it doesn't seem to line up with his mouth movements.
I don't remember. I have to go back and watch that. Actually, now
it's like awkwardly mixed, but it's kind of funny. Okay, so they go into the ductwork and they confront the lasers, and they use this machine that like drops at the same time.
Yeah, so it just reflects the lasers into each other, so it doesn't set off anything, and allows them to go into the inside.
Then there's 2 gadgets here that remind me of stuff from Doctor Who. So first, they have a sonic screwdriver that unscrews things. Unscrew screws without touching them. Then they have the thing on the arm that reminded me of the thing from Silence in the Library, the pattern buffer that the lights go up.
I never thought about that. Yes,
and that thing measures sound.
We talk about how Claire goes in and sits down and sprays
with the pen.
Yeah. I looked at the notepad that she's in there, and it's just like squiggle, 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 squiggle.
Was it like, shorthand?
I don't think it's shorthand. I think it's just squiggles.
Just doodling.
Yeah, not even doodles. It's just like blep, 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 blep.
Maybe it's code.
Maybe. I don't
know. But yes, I do remember that. Yeah, so she poisons William Donlow with Epicac or something similar, presumably that's going to make him throw up. Right. Although it's like delayed Epicac, because he doesn't instantaneously. So he puts in his coffee and also puts a tracker on him, like very delicately, like just touching his shoulder.
And he's like, "Ooh, you touched me. Hello, lady."
But he's got like a wedding ring on.
Yeah, I didn't feel like ooh. I thought it was like, did someone just touch me? That's more the impression I got from him.
He gave a little smirk.
I mean, like it's a little bit of a.
Well, sure, who wouldn't?
And then so once tracking's on there, Luther's in the truck and is like, "Hi there." So now he can see where he's going, and so as he's coming back from the canteen, Ethan has already gone down the shaft, down into the room. They pull him back up a little so he can basically see him as he's starting to work, and then he starts throwing up.
So what's the idea? The idea is that he like opens the room and then has to leave quickly so that the temperature of the body in the room is like normal.
So the temperature is controlled from the air conditioning. So because their bodies are in there, it's going to adapt around them. Basically, it's not going to notice them since they've been introduced through the air conditioning. But I think, and maybe you can tell me if I'm wrong, part of the reason they need to be in there when he's there, they need to see what the password is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because
that could be why.
Because Luther can't hack in, so they actually need to see him putting in the keystrokes.
Yeah, basically Luther, he becomes his hands and his eyes so he can do it. And the reason why, so they go through the vents, and the reason why they have to hurry up is because their body temperature is raising the ambient temperature in the room, which will kick off the sensor. But they are going through and they're sweating because, it's all of the, which will kick off, the motion sensors and the floor plating sensors, because they had already previously shown that water dripping off of a sweating cup was enough to activate the sensor. So you can, as he's going down, you could already see that Ethan is already starting to sweat. So he knows he's on borrowed time at this point, and he's constantly looking at the temperature gauge because it's so sensitive that soon as a body temperature is introduced, it starts immediately kicking off and changing what the sensors read.
Yeah. And so as soon as when Donlow leaves, and because he's throwing up, Ethan gets down, and so what the thing he's strapped into is actually a flying harness. So it's actually pretty much the same thing that he used for Superman the movie when they used those flying scenes.
Okay. So I have a question about this whole harness thing.
Yes.
So Krieger is apparently very out of shape because he can like barely do it. And he can't hold him there, but I'm like, there are machines that can winch people up and down. Why didn't they just use that?
Mm.
And Tom Cruise even has one, and it's quiet enough.
No, he doesn't have a winch.
Well, he has something that allows him to move himself up and down, like a little.
Mm-mm. That thing is a temperature. The thing that he's holding, that's a temperature gauge.
Okay.
It's just Krieger, who is watching the monitor of the glasses, knows how far up and down he needs to take him.
Okay, that's all right. Fine. But then, so when he's holding Tom Cruise in position, you guys have done mountain climbing, right? You just have mountain climbing, rock climbing, yeah. There's a position where you can just hold it where it's really not that, doesn't require that much arm strength to hold it steady. Maybe it's because it's a movie.
But he's not having difficulty holding him there. It's fine. But it's also,
what about the scene with the rat? He's like, it looks like he's really struggling.
Because he has to hold it with one hand to try to kill the rat.
And then the other thing, as you're doing climbing, the belay system is so that if you pull on it, you get suspended. He has to be able to adjust down and up. So he's not using the full belay locking system.
Yeah.
He actually has to keep him.
And also he has to do it a lot slower than you usually would probably do a belay.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
The only other thing I have about this part is it reminds you of 2001, A Space Odyssey.
It was definitely inspired by that sequence. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then this sequence has been parodied a million times since.
So he's going, well, first of all, he goes into the computer, hacks in. At this point, Luther doesn't know what they're stealing. So, he just knows that they're stealing very valuable information. And so when he uses the mouse and goes over and selects the knock list, Luther is like, "Holy Mother of God, the knock list."
He doesn't seem too concerned about it, though.
Ethan is putting it. Well, first of all, he has 2 discs for some reason, and he takes one, puts it in his mouth, and takes the other and puts it inside, and then puts the other one back. So I'm not sure. Then they look identical, so I'm not sure how he knows which disc is which.
Mm-hmm.
And so he starts downloading that data onto there. And this is when, the rat comes by, and Krieger, well, it seems like he's allergic or something.
Or afraid of him, yeah. But he sneezes, so I guess that he probably is allergic.
Mm-hmm. So the reason why, because he takes his hands off of the belay to smash the rat, Ethan flies down to the floor and is stopped, inches away from the floor. And
it's kind of a funny image of Tom Cruise freaking out, but he can't say anything.
This whole sequence is brilliantly done because it's totally silent except for Luther every so often just having one line or 2 lines. So much tension built into it.
Ethan is sweating and there's sweat on his glasses. That's a close call.
And this scene is where I really appreciate a lot of the cinematography, right? The choices of angles, the choicing of the lighting in this. So it goes on Krieger as he's straining and it's just catching the lips and up. So you can see the little tremor in his lips as he's straining, but then you can also just slightly see the rat in just enough lighting.
Right, yeah.
And there's a whole, and then it flashes over to Ethan as you can see the sweat starting to bead down, and then you go to Luther who's just like, ooh, wow. And then it goes back and to Krieger who's
you can see the bead of sweat on the glass, and then you can just see Luther praying, don't drop.
Yeah, there was a lot of good choices in this that I thought it was hilariously.
The part where he catches the sweat is impossible. Mm-hmm. Because it's
impossible.
Yes, it is. I'll show you. So, our listeners
can't show us. Okay.
So, hold on. Wait, I know I have glasses here somewhere. Here we go. So, I'm putting on my glasses.
Okay.
Sweat is dripping down on his right side and going down. Mm-hmm. He's this foot close to the ground. He catches it with his left hand.
He's just that good. He's just that amazing. So what Christian's trying to get at is that there isn't enough room to move your arm without hitting the ground.
Yeah.
And therefore setting off the pressure sensor.
The only way this works is if Luther has been, and I guess does make sense. Luther has been very slowly pulling him up. So he's not that close anymore, but he's still very close. And also the bead of sweat is just coming down. And when he catches it, it's not like it's just down. It's full on underneath, but
there's like additional space, right?
yeah.
Okay, I mean, whatever. So he's getting out, he climbs up, and for some reason, Krieger has his knife out.
Mm-hmm. And takes the disc away from Ethan.
Yes.
Well, he probably has the knife out because he just killed a rat.
Ah, I never thought about that.
I would like to see a little bit of rat blood, make it a little clearer, but whatever. So then the knife falls in slow motion. And this reminds me of a documentary on Netflix, which I can't really recommend because as a whole, it's not that good, but it's called Command and Control, and it's about an accident involving a nuclear missile. There's a part where it starts by a guy using a wrench on the edge of it, and the wrench slips out of his hands, and there's a slow motion part of the wrench falling, and it falls all the way to the bottom, and it bounce, and then it knocks into the side and like sets off like a gas leak.
Ooh.
So it reminded me of this.
This knife, all CGI.
All right, it looks good.
It looks really good.
Can't tell.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very well done.
Yeah, it's very actually, and one of the ways you can tell is actually there's other podcasts. Well, there's two great Mission Impossible podcasts out there, like The Fuse and Mission Impossible, and I don't remember which one of the two that. I think it's like The Fuse, where they mentioned that like they talked to John Knoll, who, if you know your Star Wars, worked on the special editions and the prequels. He's the one who animated this knife, and you actually see hash marks on the like screen, giving you a timing, which is an old like CGI animator trick.
Okay. So the knife falls, and then it sticks into the blade down. It sticks into the desk like that Batman story with Ra's al Ghul. And the analyst comes back, and he's like, "What?" And they have to get out of there.
And he checks the keystroke log, which I'm glad they have at least a keystroke log, so they can see that it's otherwise, if not, that seems like bad security.
Right, but so a keystroke log just logs the keys. The fact that it's like file downloaded, it's like, wait, what?
Fair.
Did he type file downloaded? Is that the log?
I mean, to get on the internet in this movie, you type internet access. So maybe.
Also, I can't believe that with all the other security systems, they don't have a freaking camera in this vault. That's crazy.
My one excuse for that is that they don't want anyone else seeing these names.
Well, you just put the camera behind the computer.
Maybe.
You can see people, but not the computer. Okay, so then our heroes escape to London, the next stop in our international jet-setting movie. And there's a confrontation with Krieger where he's like, I have the list, and I'm not going to give it to you.
This is where we have Tom Cruise, close-up magic.
Yeah, he came off as very condescending in this scene, which I did not appreciate.
Yeah,
I understand that Krieger is kind of a jerk and will eventually be revealed to be a bad guy, but no need to kick him while he's down.
Yeah,
is it that, or is it because he already recognized the knife?
I think so. I think that's part of it.
So you think he already is onto him?
Yeah, so he already...
At least he has a theory, yeah. Ethan has 2 discs, and so Krieger thinks he has the list, but he says, no, this is the real list right here. And starts doing magic tricks, like making him disappear, and it appears, and make it reappear in Claire's pocket, in his own pocket.
Right.
Krieger gets pissed off, saying, trying to sleight of hand with my money, I'll cut your throat, and tosses his disc in the trash.
Yes. And then Ethan looks at the Bible and sees that it has the Drake Hotel stamp on it. And he realizes that that's where Jon Voight was staying at, which means there's only one conclusion. Jon Voight steals Bibles from people. That's not cool.
Well, that used to be a thing. People would steal Bibles all the time from hotels and various...
I've been tempted to. Well, I've been outside the Drake Hotel, Chicago. I've never gone in, never stayed there. But if I did stay there, I would be tempted
to steal a Bible, dude. You can't steal a Bible. A towel, maybe.
I would say
really nice
I'd be tempted.
Why? I mean, what's the face for, Jay?
Why is a towel any different than a Bible, other than the Bible is supposedly the word of God?
Yeah, that's not enough. I mean, don't get me wrong. You shouldn't be stealing anything from anybody. True. But I mean, it's like stealing. It's like stealing money from a church versus from like a person. It's worse.
All right. Well, anyways, I said tempted. I didn't say I would do it. I just said I would be tempted to if I was in the Drake Hotel, just because of if it had that stamp that said placed by the Gideons in the Drake Hotel, Chicago.
Okay. So then Ethan gives the real list to Ving, to Luther, and then we see members of Ethan's family are being arrested.
Yeah, so going back to not Krieger. There are too many names in this movie.
Too many
names,
too.
Kittredge, let's find a pressure point of Ethan's. So we see a newscast with his mom and his Uncle Donald being framed for peddling a drug known as methcathinine, which is a real drug.
Oh, okay. So,
and its street name is Cat, like they say in the news broadcast.
I was kind of like, why didn't they do this in The Spy Who Dumped Me? That would have been smart. Okay, so Ethan calls the CIA and threatens them. He's like, you don't want to mess with me.
So he calls Kittredge, and as he's calling, he's watching the clock because he knows exactly how long it'll take to trace the call. He cuts it short with 3 seconds before they can pinpoint him exactly. And Kittredge notes that, he wanted us to know that he was in London, and like this whole time they're talking, he's mentioning how if you come in now, we'll drop all the charges against your parents. We can even plead down some of the ones against you. He's just trying to keep him on the phone, and Ethan knows exactly what he's trying to do, but he's one step ahead of them and wants them to know that he's in London for some reason. As he gets off the phone, he turns and sees Jim in the phone booth next to him.
Jon Voight.
Jim Phelps. He is not dead.
Do you guys actually think he was dead the first time you watched this movie?
I did. Oh yeah, I did.
Absolutely.
You guys were like kids, though, right?
I was not a kid.
I was a kid, sure, but yeah. And this scene caught me because he is in his face, in Ethan's face, and starts coughing. It made me cringe. The world we live in. I'm like, yeah, that wow. Put on a mask, Jim, and social distance. Come on, buddy.
They sit down at a restaurant, and it looks like Jon Voight is still injured. There's a part where he says, I can sit up straight, just not very well, which I liked. Tells Ethan that Kittredge is actually the mole.
And this, the first time watching, is the most confusing scene.
Okay, so I was like, Jon Voight is telling him that Kittredge is the mole, but meanwhile, they're showing the audience that actually Voight is the mole. But is Ethan figuring out at the same time as the audience?
Yes and no.
I think he's already got it up at all.
He has this suspicion in his mind already because of the Bible from the Drake Hotel, Chicago. But this is where he really puts the pieces together.
Okay.
So he's seeing all these, scenarios. All right, so he, took out Jack in the elevator. You see him, Jim pressing a button on the laptop as the prongs come out and stab Jack. Mm-hmm. And then he said, shot you on the bridge. And you see this sequence of Jim with a gun, presumably filled with blanks, turning the gun on himself with a blood packet to make it look like he'd been shot and jumping over.
Yeah, so he actually jumps over the bridge.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. No, I've looked over the edge of that bridge. It's a long way down.
Yeah, he could easily have died from that.
You presume he was dead before because you thought he was shot and then went in the water, which would probably kill him. But if you're not shot and you're perfectly healthy, I'm still a long way down, but it makes it more likely that you would survive.
Mm-hmm. And then we learn Krieger is also a bad guy in the sense that he's working for Jim.
At least he's in Ethan's head.
Yeah,
it's all in Ethan's head. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Based on what the movie is showing us, that he's the one who stabbed Sarah
and Galitzin.
Yes, and then Claire is also bad.
No, this is where Ethan's not sure. Because he first thinks, he's like, how did he do Hannah? And, he first imagines it being Claire, but he doesn't want to believe it. Mm-hmm. And he's like, no, he could have done Hannah himself. And he imagines Jim coming out of, the water and then looking at his watch and pressing the button. Which, shows, okay, so he's doubting whether Claire's involved or not. He's not really sure.
Okay.
Get the why speech.
The monologue.
Mm-hmm. And he's asking Jim why in the guise of, why do you think Kittredge did it? But he's really asking him, why did you do it, Jim?
Nice.
If you think about it, it was inevitable. No more Cold War. No more secrets to keep it from anyone or yourself. operations, you answer to no one but yourself. And then suddenly you wake up in the President of the United States is running the country without your permission. Son of a bitch, how dare he?
So it's a little bit like that senator from before, Walzer, who wanted transparency.
No, it's more that realizing that, well, and I get, so Jim is saying Kittredge is thinking this, but this is really his motivation, is that Cold War is over. We have no more use for you. Think about GoldenEye. This is what I thought about when I heard this, where it's like, you're, without the Cold War, what good are we Cold War spies? And also, we're getting paid lousy, $60,000 or $62,000 a year. Although we looked it up, apparently it's about $100,000 now.
Which seems pretty good, but I guess he was ambitious for more.
At the end of this big speech, Ethan's still pretending that he believes Jim. He tells him the plan, which I assume is there just to lure him there.
Yeah, the plan is still on, despite everything.
And they're taking a TGV, which is or TGV, if you want to do the French pronunciation, to Paris, which is it's a high-speed train that goes between London and Paris. And he tells Jim, once we leave, get into our safe house, get some rest. And I'll meet up with you later.
So next scene is they're on the train. They've got the disc. They've got our heroes. They've got Max's people. They've got the real CIA people.
So everyone's on the train.
Everyone's there.
And we see someone in a trench coat putting together a gun, which is hidden in a boombox.
Yep.
Max thought there would be a face-to-face meeting. But Ethan is just calling her on the phone and says, reach under your seat. I always love this. Reach under your seat and grab the disc. So somehow he has time to set this up. And so there's the disc there. She gives Ethan the location of the money, baggage car, silver briefcase combination 314.
Yep.
Because she likes to stick to a theme.
Branding's important.
So the whole look underneath your seat, find the disc. I like the whole aspect that where he's going at Krieger with the magic hands of knowing where to look and where to grab things. It basically sets up the fact that he can do this. Like, this is a skill that he knows. He knows how to read people. He knows how to read the room, figure out where things are going to be, and manipulate the environment for his own magical sake.
I like that. Yeah, so they're checking the list, but across the aisle from them is Luther with a jamming device that jams them from getting access to the internet.
Good, because they're not just going to hand over the real list to the bad guys. I thought it was going to be another fake list.
No, it's the real list, and I think we talked about this in what was it, Breach, where I was saying, how ridiculous is it that they gave the guy who they're suspecting of being basically CIA's first cyber criminal access to everything because they need to catch them in the act? And I even said that this is more ridiculous in real life than any of the things where Tom Cruise dangles actual real things to the criminals, but then needs to steal it back.
Right, like here.
Max tells Ethan where the money is, and also Claire spots Kittredge and Barnes on the train and she tells Ethan, and he says, I'm right behind you, meet me in the baggage car.
Right.
And so Claire goes into the baggage car and sees Jim sitting there. Is not surprised. And basically says, do we have to kill Ethan? No one's seen you alive. We'll take the money. Ethan takes the blame.
Right.
And so she's softening. She's like, I don't know if I feel good about killing Ethan and more. And then Jim touches his face, pulls it. It's a mask, and it's Ethan underneath.
It's another freaking mask. Okay, so I would like in these movies to explain where the masks come from and how they make them.
They do later.
And I know they do it in later movies, but not in this one.
Because you're not supposed to know. That's a spy secret.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think the masks are probably my least favorite part of this entire franchise. I know that they're classic. Well, I think it's not a coincidence that my personal favorite one, Ghost Protocol, doesn't have any masks in it, if I recall correctly. And if it does have them, they are very limited.
There's one. There's one mask, actually.
Okay, so they exposes Claire and Jim, but then the real Jim pops out. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Dressed like a commando.
Yep.
There's a fight. Claire gets shot and presumably killed.
Mm-hmm.
And then the real action starts.
Yeah. So as we'd seen, Jim, we found, so it's Jim who was putting together that gun, because that's the gun that was used. There are only 2 shots in that gun. And so he uses one to shoot Claire, and he's about to shoot Ethan with the other. Ethan gets around him and, has him fire into the air. So now that's why he doesn't try to shoot him again after that.
Mm-hmm.
And so Jim goes on top of the train, and he goes first to cradle Claire's lifeless body, feeling bad, and then goes up on the train to join him.
So this whole scene on top of the train, I assume that I know that Tom Cruise does crazy stunts in later movies, but this isn't one of them, is it?
Yes and no.
Okay. Because
parts of it were filmed on a train, but going at a slower speed, and they sped up the film.
And was it actually Tom Cruise or stunt doubles doing it?
Tom Cruise.
Okay.
We're done with green screen with a giant fan.
With the camera, when it's on the side, it looks green screened. But I will say that every part of this, it felt real. You felt like they were going at a ridiculously high speed.
Yep.
Unlike other movies like, say, Speed, where you have people on top of the train. And it feels like they're going like maybe 25 miles an hour.
Yeah, but that's different between, like, what was it? The New York subway and, was that New York? Where was Speed? LA subway.
Mm-hmm.
And the TGV, which is like a bullet train style thing.
But they're both going to be ridiculously fast. And the characters should feel like they're barely hanging on.
I don't know.
And they should look like they're flying fast with air. Okay. Well, realism aside, it made it a lot more exciting. So I appreciated that.
Well, yeah, as all of this is going on, Luther, he's still trying to jam them, but has to leave because he sees Krieger and Barnes. And Krieger and Barnes are talking very loudly, saying, like, we don't even know what Max looks like. We don't need to know. He's going to want to check that list. And you know what that means? Laptops. Of course, Luther's there with a laptop with, like, a thing that says, activate jamming sequence.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, this looks suspicious. So he's able to, he closes the laptop. He's able to keep, jamming them with the phone, except the signal that the phone is giving off makes it look like it's ringing. One of these conductors sees it and brings it over to Luther and is like, your telephone, sir. He's like, oh, thanks. And as that happens, all of these phones around him are getting jammed, and one of Max's henchmen sees that, gets very suspicious, starts following Luther, and Luther barricades himself inside the bathroom. And as this is happening, Barnes and Krieger notice, not Krieger, Kittredge notice, one of the henchmen banging on the door and like, what's going on? All right, let's pick this lock. Oh, and we skipped over the fact that Ethan uses the glasses.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to that.
Yeah,
I wanted to get back to that at some point.
So before they jumped out, on top of the train, Ethan's like, you were wrong about one thing. I'm not the only one who's seen you alive.
Well, he doesn't even directly say that. He's just like, you're just wrong about one thing first.
Oh, yeah.
And then he goes and he's like, do you mind if I just reach over? And then he pulls out the glasses. He slowly opens them up and puts them on. And there is Kittredge looking at his watch. He gets an alert to look at his watch or
his
something.
Watch that looks like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Dick Tracy watch, right? Yeah.
And there it is. His face right there.
It says, "Good morning, Mr. Phelps," which is, of course, the line from the recordings that they get in each mission.
Yeah. And so that actually led me to a question of, was the glasses recording the whole time, or do they only record when they're open and on your face?
From what I know of the glasses, I think they record it the whole time, because unless they get crushed or something. Because when back in Prague in the safe house, they're still on. Like when Ethan gets back to the safe house, he goes back to the laptop, and you see all the different camera feeds that Jim was watching, including his glasses. Sarah,
they look like glasses in the vault.
Yeah, so those glasses are still recording, but the ones from other people who had been exploded or crushed are off like a static signal.
Okay, that makes sense.
So,
but then,
as long as they have battery, they will keep recording.
But then that makes me wonder, how did Kittredge know to look at his watch? Like, what was the signal that came off for him to suddenly go, "Oh, there you are"?
Oh, that's a good question.
I presume that because Ethan was lying in wait for him and Claire, he just had the glasses recording the whole time.
Yeah.
Just set him up and let him run.
Right, but then the indicator for suddenly for him to look at his watch to see the face, which is what threw me off. That made me wonder if you had to turn them on by opening it. I mean, it could still be the case that maybe once you first open them up, then they start recording and then they stay recording after until you're told to shut off. That might be the case. The other thing I wanted to go back to real fast was when they're talking and Jim is like, "That's you, Claire. You're the other reason," and you're like,
You
"Wait,
skipped over
what?
this.
You do not covet another man's wife?" And you're like, "I didn't know if you would go for it, but having tasted," and you're like, "Oh no,
Because
oh, they're
what's
Eskimo
the age
brothers
gap?
now."
What's the age gap between Claire and Jim? We haven't discussed this, but she's
It's
a much
large.
younger wife.
Well, didn't he say he was married to one of them? Was it Claire?
It's Claire.
At the beginning of the movie, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm just like that age, but like still the age gap, and also just saying having tasted the goods, like oh no.
Yeah, why do you have to put it like that?
Yeah, but yeah, we kind of glossed over the fact that the reason that Ethan already knew about Jim, but didn't know about Claire, and like that's the reason why he's still performing this charade because he needs to capture or know who everyone was involved, and there's a whole sort of cut plot line about, and it's you can still see vestiges of it, but like that that Ethan was kind of in love with Claire.
Well,
at least has some sort of connection, or at least some sort of.
Well, they made in like some cut scenes that were actually in the trailer. There's like they made more explicit, like when he goes back to the safe house after he finds Jim. I think like they kiss or something, and the novelization makes it much more explicit.
I'm sure it does.
He feels terrible that he's in love with his mentor's wife.
Right.
But I'm
his
glad.
Dead mentor's wife.
Yeah. So I'm glad that they cut that because it just makes another layer that we don't really need. But then this sort of scene at the end doesn't quite gel because it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, back to the action. So they're on top of the train. Krieger is in a helicopter, and he's there to get Jim. So
yes,
Jim,
like from the opening of Batman the movie with the rope ladder.
Yeah, so he's got a cable with a carabiner on it, and he's like Jim's climbing his way to the end of the train. And Ethan so Jim has got like climbing gear. He's got the magnetic suction cups
right from before, and then Ethan like slides down, and he's able to like attach a cable. Attach the helicopter to the train. And when he does, he goes, ah!
And then he kicks it.
Yeah, I like that part. It felt very real. Like,
but yeah,
like
so
not something that someone would say.
Jim kicks him off, so he's on the side of the train now.
Mm-hmm.
As they're, the cable, was that Krieger's trying to pull the helicopter away, but he's attached, and they approach a tunnel.
And you're like, okay, Krieger's dead. Yeah.
The helicopter into the tunnel.
So Krieger's not dead yet. He's just in the helicopter. He's a very good pilot.
No, but I'm like, Krieger's gonna die here. He's got to.
So they bring him in. So he's inside the tunnel, and we get this cartoony-looking conductor who's like, "No,
boy, governor,
in the train. No, don't slow down. Accelerate."
Which is the last thing Ethan needs. Jon Voight makes his way onto the landing gear, and then Ethan is hanging onto like a windshield wiper, and then Krieger tries to cut him in half with the rotor of the chopper. It's ridiculous.
I mean, so he's still pissed. I think Krieger does not like magic. That's my theory. So he's still
put him over the edge.
Yes.
But it's like he would definitely crash if he actually was able to make contact with Ethan.
And that's what happens. He goes so far down that his tail rotor hits the roof of the tunnel.
Yeah.
And so that like jolts him, throws him off, gives Ethan the chance to get up, jump
Mhm.
onto the other landing. What's that called?
It's like I just call it landing gear. It's probably called
Landing
something.
rail. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other strut.
Hmm.
Sure, we'll
And
go with that.
yeah, takes out some gum.
Another piece of gum. I guess he has two.
Yeah. Well, I think
It's
he
a
gave
full pack.
Jack gave him a full pack. I mean, you've only seen him use it once so far.
Right.
And he shouts, "Red light, green light!" Smashes it into the front of the helicopter, positions himself in front of the helicopter, and it explodes, killing Krieger. Jim is crushed underneath it, and it propels him forward into
Onto the train. Ridiculous. But also, the gum is powerful.
Mhm.
Didn't they say when they first use it, you're supposed to use it for like safe cracking?
They just say, "Oh, actually, you're right. You're right. Come up against a lock you can't pick. You mash it together. Hasta lasagna.
Yeah,
Don't
that
get
wasn't
out."
a that was a boom.
But yeah. So yeah, it's very powerful stuff. I
Yes,
forgot
apparently.
that it was for safe cracking.
Shattered glass of a fish tank. I mean, it's not like it didn't cause a rupture in gas lines or anything. So, like, yeah, it's meant for smaller explosions. So, I guess you could say cause the initial, and then maybe it caused the tank to blow up or something, which gives them the extra time to get blasted forward. Who knows?
I mean, it's fine. It's an action movie. We want explosions. I just thought it was kind of funny. And
Yeah.
I did like that Jon Voight didn't have this like big dramatic
No, you do
villain
see him get
death.
sort of crushed very quickly.
Yeah, not enough of those in movies.
Yeah, and so as the helicopter explodes, it's tumbling forward, and it collides with the back of the train, where Ethan is still on the train, basically right below the windshield of the back of the train.
Right.
And as it's slowing down and moving, one of the rotors comes up and goes right in front of his neck.
And it's all like jagged, I guess, because it's partially broken.
And exploded.
Yeah, another near miss. Another happy
With
landing.
the just the sting of the music, dun dun, and it's just right as it's the music. So the music, we've briefly talked about music, but it's by Danny Elfman, and it's kind of which is a weird choice you'd think for a Mission Impossible movie, because it's Danny Elfman's got his real signature style, but it works really well. And he only goes into the full-on Mission Impossible theme like
a few
twice.
times. Yeah.
Oh, other than title sequence, obviously. But yeah,
Yes.
so and as this happens, we have the very cartoony-looking conductor watching this and then fainting.
Yep. So then the next I have is we go to Max, who's being arrested.
Yep.
She's like, my lawyers are going to have a field day with this, to which Kittredge says, we'll just leave the courts out of this one.
Right?
So I was like, oh, so she's going to Guantanamo Bay and is going to get waterboarded?
Yes and no, maybe. Well, also, basically, well, she says, I'm sure we can work out there's something I have that you want. So she's trying to get a deal.
Yep. Do you think that's like social commentary? Like the rich and powerful always get away with it?
Maybe. Who knows? Also, Luther is there, and he's the one who actually hands over the disc to Kittredge.
Mm-hmm.
And then later, Luther and Ethan meet in a bar in London, and so we find out that Ethan's folks have been cleared, and Luther is off the disavowed list now.
So all is forgiven basically for both Ethan and Luther.
And so Luther's going to back to work at the IMF. And he wants Ethan to come back with him, and he's like, "No, I don't think so. I just don't know what I'd be doing it for anymore." And so Ethan gets on a plane, and I guess seems like he's going home. Maybe he's going back to Wisconsin. But while he's on the plane, the stewardess comes up. "Would you like to watch a movie, Mr. Hunt?" And he's like, "No, thank you." He's like, "Would you consider the cinema of the Caribbean?"
Oh, it's like in the beginning.
Cue the music.
Geez, they don't even give him a break before his next mission.
Yeah, so it's like The Godfather. Just when I think I'm out, they pull me back in.
Well, he also seemed confused too. He was like, "What? What are you talking about?"
Well, no, he at first he was like confused, and he realized, oh, that's what this is.
Yep.
And that's where our movie ends.
With more music.
Of the next adventure to come.
I think that podcast was just about as long as the movie was itself.
Probably longer.
And we're not even into spy fact versus fiction yet.
It's like 5 minutes shorter than the movie.
Well, podcast is not over yet. So, first spy fact, first spy fiction. So, obviously, the Impossible Mission Force is, as far as we know, not a real thing. But so in one of the scenes, I think it's when we get the initial briefing in the plane, we actually see everyone's sort of IMF files, and we see everyone's GS levels, and we see that Ethan's is, where is it? I have it written down. GS 17, Step 9, Merit 5, which GS 17 doesn't exist anymore. It stopped at GS 15.
So he's like really high.
Apparently, at one time there were three GS super grades, GS 16, 17, and 18, but these were eliminated in 1978.
Yeah, now they're like basically rolled into the SES level.
Exactly. Now, I already talked about how Jim Phelps was on the original show. He came in on the second season to replace Dan Briggs, who was in the first season.
Mm-hmm.
IMF was originally an independent organization. In the novelization, they explained that it was folded into the CIA. But in future films, it seems like they seem like they're independent again. Now, the target from the first from the embassy, Alexander Golitsyn, seems to be named after Anatoly Golitsyn, who was a KGB defector. Basically, gave a lot of information to the CIA on the operations of the KGB. Let's see, the place where I think I mentioned that where they filmed the embassy in Prague is not actually a U.S. embassy. The actual embassy is in that area, though. It's just like further back from the river, not on Kampa Island, which is where the location that they used was for the exterior.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of the Octavarium restaurant over there's actually a hotel and a art gallery. And then London, they didn't film in Langley for exterior shots and driving shots. They filmed in Virginia, but Langley was not used for the interiors. It was London County Hall. And so the knock list. Knock list stands, I mentioned it briefly, non-official cover, as opposed to official cover, which is if you're working at an embassy or some sort of government organization as your cover identity. So you have that protection, basically, where you can, if you get caught, you won't be killed. You're merely extradited and persona non grata in that country. If you're non-official cover, that means you're undercover as a businessman or whatnot, something else, not a government agent. So in that case, you can be, and non-official cover is a real thing. But so far as we know, there is no knock list, because that seems like a terrible idea to keep all of that information together in one place.
Yeah, why would you?
Finally, so in that video, which Senator Walzer is talking, and I'm trying to remember who the interviewer guy is, because that's a real guy who was interviewing him. But he accuses him of like trying to lead the kind of charge that Senator Frank Church led, which disabled the intelligence gathering of this country. So the Church Committee was a Senate committee in the 1970s, where he was trying to investigate basically intelligence abuses in 1975.
Mm.
Yeah, so that was a real thing. Yeah.
So the interviewer is John McLaughlin.
That's who it is. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so that's what I've got for spy fact versus spy fiction.
All right, thank you. Next, we have our favorite quotes from the movie. Anyone want to go first? Jay, how about you?
I laughed when it got to the toast.
Toast.
Like that by far. I think that was like when I actually started to connect with him more, because I was like, that's probably something I would do. I'd be stupid like that. But like it caught me off guard because it was funny, because you don't really necessarily like your toast. Oh, hey, he's kind of clever. That's kind of where it got me. So like looking back on that was like when I started going, okay, I can actually get really into these things. But yeah, it made me chuckle, and then chuckle again when I was watching it again.
All right, Zach.
Well, a lot of the ones that I liked, we've sort of gone over already, but I liked where in the first scene with Kittredge, when he gets on Tom Cruise's case And Ethan says, "You've never seen me very upset." I mean, it's like a little bit funny, but it's also kind of cool. It also reminds me of the Incredible Hulk.
I have two I really like.
All right.
So the first one is by Kittredge. How many identities do you think Hunt has? How many times he's slipped past customs in how many countries? These men are trained to be ghosts. We taught them to do it, for Christ's sake.
Mm-hmm.
And my other is Ethan, when he's goading Kittredge and trying to make him track him to London. He says, "If you're dealing with a man who's crushed, shot, stabbed, and detonated 5 members of his own IMF team, how devastated do you think you're going to make him by hauling Mom and Uncle Donald to the county courthouse?"
Yeah, the reputation that we see for Ethan is beginning to get formed in this movie. Okay, well, we've taken care of quotes, so it's time for our ratings. I'm sure on a very emotional subject. As always, it's from Martinis, 1 being a terrible spy movie, 10 being the greatest spy movie you've ever seen. And how would you guys rate Mission Impossible 1?
As our guest, you want to?
As a straight up spy movie, I mean, it's has really good elements of semi-truth, semi-reality with the fantastic. As a straight up spy movie, it's mediocre, but overall, it's a fantastic movie. And that's probably just my colored lens from my back in the days. So 1 was worse, and what was the high again?
10.
10.
I'd give it a good solid 7.
All right.
Okay. I can go next. I would also give it a 7. I think it's a good movie, but I don't consider it to be like a great movie, especially considering the heights that this series has gone to before. The plot was a little bit confusing, and the stunts were good, but also could be better. So, I think 7 is reasonable. It doesn't quite reach 8.
All right. Well, I'm sure anyone who's heard me talk about this movie can predict where I'm going with this. Because this, like I said, I know I'm biased, but I have to just lean into that bias because this, it was the first spy movie I saw, and it's what got me into spy movies. So, like all the sleight of hand, all the deception, all the double talk, is what. And even though I've seen it probably at least 100 times now, when I watch it, I sit down, I'm totally and captured by it, and I have to give it a 9.
Whoa.
I could see that. I could absolutely see that. Yeah, like a lot of the double play, the bouncing back, that was all fantastic stuff.
Also, like, if you other than your Star Wars and whatnot, this is the first adult move, in terms of it's not for kids, it's not a kids movie, it's not an any edge of Star Wars or Disney movie. So the fact that the hero doesn't get the girl at the end, and the girl dies, and he's betrayed by his mentor. As an 11-year-old, that was mind blowing.
Well, I'm actually more surprised that you didn't rate it higher, given all that. So what would be like a 10 out of 10 movie for you?
I don't know, because does this perfect spy movie exist? Maybe.
Well,
is it another film in this series? Maybe. But we'll see when we get there.
Well, to me, Ghost Protocol is 9 out of 10. So how would you rate Ghost Protocol?
Like I said, we'll see when we get there.
Okay.
I think the reason why I gave it a 7 instead of an 8 is because I remember watching it and feeling stupid. And that anger of me going, wait, I have to watch this again because I still don't get it. I am dumb. I feel dumb. I will never be a spy. I am too dumb for this role in my life. I cannot do this.
Like, as an 11-year-old, I was so confused. But that confusion led me to watch it, multiple times. And then, by the second time, I figured it out. And then, of course, every other time after that I watched it, there's little bits more that you can pick up. Oh, actually, I forgot one thing for spy fact versus spy fiction.
Okay.
All the crap that Luther is talking about when he's asking for, I need all this gear. So he says Cray access. So Cray computers are supercomputers. And Stu 3s is another thing he mentioned. Now, I went to the NSA Museum, which or the National Cryptologic Museum, which is part of the NSA. So Stu 3s are secure telephone units. And the Stu 3 was a family of secure telephones introduced in 1987 by the NSA for the U.S. government. So,
yeah, they were still in use for a long time. I mean, they eventually got replaced with the secure Ethernet lines, but yeah, they were.
Apparently, the last one was used on December 31st, 2009, according to the NSA Museum.
That's specific.
Yeah. It's a very specific date. It was probably just them changing them over at the end of the year. But yeah, so last bit of bonus spy fact versus spy fiction there.
Great. Anything else you guys want to talk about before we get going?
No, I don't think so.
I think I'm good.
Actually, I just want to thank everyone for bearing with me as I completely fanboyed out for this entire episode. And yeah.
Jay, anything else you want to plug?
Sure, I guess. Feel free to join us on Zach and I on our other podcast, and also on Twitch at twitch.tv/mcslanty, where we record the podcast as well as play video games. You can find me on feedyournerd.com as a webcomic artist, and thank you for allowing me to partake and join in on this fun adventure.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure having you. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us. You can find us on social media at the Spy-Fi Guys under Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Until next time, I'm Zach.
And I'm Christian.
And we are the Spy-Fi Guys, signing off.
Thank you for listening to the Spy-Fi Guys. If you enjoyed our podcast, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. The theme song from this podcast is Mistake the Getaway by Kevin MacLeod from Incompetech.com. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. Films, books, and television shows reviewed by our podcast are the intellectual property of their respective copyright holders, and no infringement is intended.
This is a personal podcast. Any views, statements, or opinions expressed in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the participants. They do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the participants may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity unless explicitly stated. Any views or opinions are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, or individual.
You can find our podcast on social media at The Spy-Fi Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.